Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, and Monday's the day we talk about money. So I just want to, first of all, say how delighted I am that we've been able to keep going in a very strong and expansive way because of all your support. Any good idea that occurs to us, we've been able to carry out because we've been supported by all of you. So, our social media presence keeps chugging along thanks to Ishani's work. And Bhavani helps with all the technical issues. And we're also doing some audio books for Crystal Clarity, taking some other titles of Swamiji's. I and one or two others are also beginning to create those, and then they have to be edited. Translation, the publication of Light Bearer coming soon in Spanish and Italian has brought to my attention the fact that the index that I had done for that book in English was very disappointing to me because it was too good. And that sounds weird, but it was too good from a professional indexer's point of view, which is that there's all these categories, subcategories, and sub-subcategories, which essentially means that you have to know what's in the book before you can find anything. And even I, who know what's in the book, can't find anything through the printed index because it's not done by ordinary keywords. So I was very disappointed, and it was entirely my fault because I was just kind of out of juice at that point and I didn't supervise it. So now all of a sudden I find out that the index is also translated. I thought you would just recreate an index, but it's also translated. So I'm taking the opportunity to get the English language index redone so that the Italian and Spanish indexes will also be useful to people. If you have an e-version of the book, which of course I have, you can search it e-version, but if you're just turning the pages of the index, anyway. So it's been a source of great dismay to me in the fact that now we're going to be able to get a good index for that book, for the reprint, for the translations. It's making me very happy, 100%, because of your support. Patreon is the way a lot of you are helping out. Patreon is this marvelous idea which connects people who have money to share with creative people who need support. So if you want to go to the Patreon website, you can sign up that way, or PayPal account, Mission of the Masters. That's what we're doing now. I finally got it shifted over from being Asha to Mission of the Masters, which is a nonprofit corporation that we set up trying to get the U.S. government to make us tax exempt, which we qualify for. But the U.S. government is not functioning at its best right now, so I'm having to wait to get that sorted out. But in the meantime, that's what you can do, and we're doing good work, and we're all doing it together, and I'm just so happy. Thank you. Now let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless us with intuitive understanding of your divine guidance and your presence within. We are your children. We stumble through this world as best we can, but if you will take us by the hand and light the way, then we can walk joyously together forever into thy light. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, my friends, we're at a really interesting part of this leadership book, one that I've always known and remembered, has been part of my mental lexicon for many years, which is about what do you do as a leader when you have strong personal intuition and you have a feeling about how things that can be done. How do you use that intuition? What is intuition and how do you use it properly? So, Swami says, what is one to make of personal intuition? The section before was just talking about not bludgeoning your subordinates into cooperation with you and not taking advantage of your position And so there is then the question of intuition. If you have a feeling about something that other people don't necessarily share or aren't persuaded by, what do you do then? What is one to make of personal intuition? Certainly it exists. Probably no major victory is ever achieved without it. There are people, moreover, who possess this faculty in greater measure than others. The best leaders almost always possess it in abundance, even when they exercise it unconsciously, which is an interesting point. Let's spend a moment and talk about what actual intuition is. When Swami created this marvelous course called Superconscious Living, created in 1979. I've been doing a course on Wednesday nights, going through the book Light Bearer, year by year of my life with Swami Kriyananda and how he built Ananda. So I have really exact dates in my head, which I was losing a little, but now they're all back. So anyway, Swami created this course called Superconscious Living, which was like a synthesis of everything about the spiritual path. And he hoped it would be like a program, that a recognizable program that many people could teach, because the curriculum would be defined. So far, it hasn't been picked up by anyone in the way that Swami saw that it could be used, but one of my criteria for what I included in Light Bearer, my criteria for what I included in Light Bearer was intuitive. I put in the book what said it should be in the book. But one of my common sense objectives, and Swami talks about intuition and common sense here, was that I wanted to include in Light Bearer many of those initiatives of Swamiji's that he saw as having a great potential, but that potential has not yet been realized. And many of those things would be a life's work for many people. And so my hope is, by documenting at least some of them, future readers will feel a resonance. Oh, that's something I could do. So this Superconscious Living course, and I'm giving it credit because it clarified in glorious ways many fundamentals. And one of them is it talked about that there are basically three levels of consciousness that we're living with all the time. And one is, it's the subconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious. Subconscious has a certain meaning in psychology. I'm not a student of psychology, but it has a certain meaning there, which is not exactly how Swami uses it. So let me start by defining it. I just swallowed wrong. Nothing worse than that. Okay. I remember I suppressed a cough once in the middle of a meditation. When I finally couldn't suppress it anymore, I just sounded like a dying person, and the entire church had to suffer with me. And if I had just gone right at the beginning, it never would have happened. This was close to that, but now we're done. Subconscious. So subconscious, according to the way Swami's talking about it this way, is basically everything that you already are. All the past experiences that we've had, and this, of course, because we're talking reincarnation also, just everything that you've ever been and done, it's all accumulated as in your subconscious. I mean, it's, you think of it, if you think of it in physical terms, you have to have all these civilizations and all these houses and all these people. But every experience has a vibration of consciousness somewhere between complete delusion and God realization. Now we get into the chakras, and I highly recommend that you learn all of this. And there's many ways to learn it, including going to my YouTube channel and just typing in whatever words interest you. If you can understand the three levels of consciousness, the chakras, reincarnation, and karma, which are all big, big things, and the yugas, big things to really understand. But then you have a philosophical basis for discipleship, for devotion, for service, for everything. So The subconscious is everything that we've already accomplished, everything that's behind us, and it's vibrations of consciousness. It's like vibration. What state of consciousness did this represent? Maybe I was a king, maybe I was a peasant, maybe I was married with a bunch of children, maybe I was a nun, whatever I might have been, somewhere on the scale between God realization and delusion, I was operating. I was answering the questions, what is real? Where does happiness come from? Who am I? By doing certain things. And always behind it were those principles. I was making decisions. When I am meditating and I can feel very free and my body is not an issue and my personality is thankfully for a little while asleep, you know, that there's a certain awareness of what is real, what is eternal. When I'm going down the highway and somebody cuts me off in such a way that I think I'm about to be smashed, and I feel this great surge of fear that something terrible is about to happen to me, that's a certain vibration of consciousness. When we had an earthquake here in 1989, and the building I was in began to shake, later, everybody was talking about what did you do, and some people at least said, and I'll believe them, oh, they just thought, Om Guru, Om Guru. I didn't. I started screaming and ran from the room, and I was not proud of that. But in that moment, when I thought the building was going to fall down on me, I just reacted with a fear and panic. I wished I had just turned calmly toward the infinite, but I didn't, because there was a vibration in me that was, I am the body and I have to protect the body, and the body is being threatened, and that's who I am. So our subconscious has all these, everything that we've ever been and what we've developed up until this point. And the subconscious wants, let me phrase it, I'll come back to that in a second. So the subconscious is just there, and it can take all those things that happen and keep rearranging them. It can rearrange them in dreams that you have in your sleep. It can rearrange them in visual images. It can come out as art or poetry or songs or anything you like. But when you get sensitive to it, you can begin to see subconscious expression. Subconscious expression is not actually bringing in a new vibration. It's just taking the vibrations that are already there and rearranging them. Most artists work from their subconscious. Many artists celebrate working from their subconscious. I listened to Bob Dylan's songs very peripherally during the time that he was popular. Truthfully, until I got to Ananda, I never did anything, really. I just never put myself into anything. So the people around me listened to Bob Dylan, so I listened to Bob Dylan. Lately, when I've seen, his lyrics here and there, it's just stream of consciousness. It's just one image leads to another image leads to another. And it's not that it's without power, but at least I don't find that it goes anywhere. It just keeps going around where we've all been before, which is why everybody likes it, because it's familiar. It rearranges all these images in a very creative way. He was definitely, and he had a lot of energy. Maybe there's some songs that are better than that, I don't know. But I've noticed in the lyrics that I've seen. So that's the whole subconscious reality. Then let's go to the superconscious reality. The superconscious reality is where we're trying to go. It's what the whole point of the whole story is, that we're trying to move into a new reality in which we answer the questions, what is real, where does happiness come from, who am I, in ways that are a revelation to us. And the superconscious is truly creative, because the superconscious is like the funnel. Our egoic consciousness is at the small part of the funnel, but the funnel opens out literally to infinity. So it's where we're trying to go to become who we really are, which is much bigger than our present state of realization on this spectrum between God realization and subconscious. And the superconscious, both the superconscious and the subconscious, exert a magnetic power. The magnetic power of the subconscious is the whirling, vritti is the word for it, which means whirlpool. but vritti means whirlpool of energy, literally in the chakras. It's a vritti of familiarity, of I know just what this is about, this is me, this feels right, because it does feel right, because it's extremely familiar. It's also, it has characteristics, which is less, we put out, we stay within the known, it's more, it's just, it's a known, it's the repository of the known misery. Even if it's miserable, at least it's familiar and we don't have to deal with the unknown. The superconscious is truly creative in the sense that it's not rearranging what's already there. It's bringing us into worlds we haven't seen before. It's making us more expansive. It's making us, it's biggening our hearts. It's making our sense of self. It's redefining our sense of self. And the magnetic force from there is the magnetic force of divine consciousness, drawing us into cosmic consciousness. So that's the superconscious, and it's clear, it's high energy, it's luminous, it's a luminous force. And so we have the subconscious and the superconscious. The conscious mind, the conscious self, which you can sort of, it has characteristics also. But the real thing about the conscious mind is it's the battleground. It's the battleground of influences. Like, am I going to listen to being drawn up into a higher, more dynamic, more spiritual reality? Or am I going to, stay with what's known? I've mentioned at different times, a friend of mine was about to make a very poor decision. And the basis of her making the decision was, well, that's the way I was raised. She was more than 60 years old. Both her parents had already passed away. I said, when will you become your own person? And fortunately for her, but it was just her subconscious. This is familiar to me. This is the way I was raised. So this is the decision I'm going to make because this is the way I was raised. Who cares how you were raised? The question is, who do you want to be? And God bless her, it made sense to her, and she saw she almost made a very serious mistake. She went into the unknown, which for her has worked out beautifully. It was the battleground, and it was safer to just fall back. So, just a moment now. Let me catch what I was going to say here. So, then we come to the subject of intuition in all of this, and intuition. You have to qualify intuition, because intuition is the inner voice, the part of me that says this feels right. But you have to ask yourself whether this is subconscious or superconscious intuition. I remember this gentleman came to see Swamiji, and he was about to make a bad decision, which he did make. And it did not work out for him very well. He was about to make a bad decision, and Swamiji was doing his best. I think I was in the room. Sometimes Swami kept me in the room when he was talking to people. Because I was his secretary, I was often privy to a lot. People's letters went through my hands and so on. But at times, I don't know why, but I feel like I was in the room when this happened. This gentleman Swami was encouraging him in another direction, but it wasn't Swami's way to demand of people that they follow what he said, which is why he was such a good leader. But he tried to encourage this man, and the man finally, his argument was, but it feels so right, which of course is what people say. It feels so right. So after he left, I said to Swamiji, I have this impression, because so you see, I had the opportunity to ask Swamiji whether my thoughts were accurate or not. So I said, I have the impression that it feels so right because he has isolated himself within his own sphere. He's not receptive to what you're saying. He's not receptive to common sense, which we'll talk about later in the week, common sense. He's just put himself in his own world, and of course it feels right, because it's everything that he's ever been. It's incredibly familiar. He knows exactly how to run the story, and so naturally it feels right to him. When you come in, your Swamiji, when you try to come in with your energy, you're bringing an energy into him that he is less familiar with, that feels a little foreign to him. Now, well, this is where the whole thing about intuition comes in. So he followed what was his subconscious intuition, and it proved catastrophic. Thankfully, the man, after many years, has worked it out and is in a better place with all of it. But Swami wanted to spare him the karma, but he didn't want to be spared the karma. So when we start talking about intuition, we have to talk about subconscious intuition versus superconscious intuition. And you also have to realize that it's progressive. Because if a person is completely defined from the outside, and so it depends on who we are and what we're doing. When I was, I would have been 20, and I was working for this small law firm in San Francisco. I was a legal secretary. I was a very bad secretary, but nonetheless, I got the job because I made a good impression with my mouth. But I really didn't have any idea what I was doing, and I didn't know how to learn. But that's beside the point. Nonetheless, I had the job. And there was a girl in the office, and she was getting married. She was probably a little older than I, but not by much. I've always been a very eccentric person, and I guess the word partly was nonconformist. At that point, I never went with trends. I never liked fashion. It wasn't that I wasn't vulnerable as a teenager to all that stuff, but making up your own mind in your own way, well, it was how I was raised. I'll say that. It was partly because the family was Jewish. It was not that long after the Second World War, and we all knew that we had to make it on our own. We couldn't depend on the society around us. In my family, that wasn't an aggressive thought. We weren't personally impacted by the Second World War, but nonetheless, it's part of the culture that I was raised in. And as it happens, it's part of my own nature. So to me, getting married was like a super personal thing to do. And you would do it the way it was meaningful to you. But this lady, God bless her, she just lived completely from outside herself. And she was literally planning her whole marriage according to magazines. She would be looking at this magazine and that magazine and trying to figure out what you were supposed to do and how you were supposed to do it. And I was dumbfounded. I just couldn't imagine getting married according to a magazine. It just seemed nuts to me. Now that woman would have benefited even from subconscious intuition, even from just saying, I want a pink dress instead of a white one. It would have been just a great step forward for her to make her own decisions about anything from this feels right to me, rather than asking an external source. But once you've begun at least to listen to your inner motivation, then we have to learn to discern from what level that inner voice is speaking. So mere feeling, inner voice, like that man was saying, it feels right. Why does it feel right? My friend who was about to make a terrible decision, it felt right because it was familiar, it was secure, it was the known misery. If I go into an area that I've never experienced, maybe it'll be better, but what if it's worse? I'd rather just stick with what's familiar to me. So people get a little confused because they do feel it. They feel it strongly inside, and sometimes even psychics, they're better and more attuned and wiser psychics, will confirm your subconscious feeling because they'll just read your energy. And your energy is completely committed to this subconscious idea. And they'll tell you, that's right, that's what you should do. And you'll say, yeah, it feels so right to me. But it's not directionally upward. It's just moving around on the track that you're already on. So it isn't just a question of feeling. It isn't just a question of it being right. It's what level of myself is talking to me. And this is where, multiple things take place. common sense when we get to it, and I'll talk about that more later. But it's also, what happens is, well, what happens is you pay attention to others, you learn from other people's mistakes, and then you pay attention to yourself. What did this feel like? What moved me to do this? How did it work out? And then if we're honest in our introspection, and this is where the conscious mind battleground takes place. Even when we're introspecting, the subconscious wants us to side with it. And it'll give us all these reasons why it really was the right thing and it was really someone else's fault. And if they'd only just listened to me or whatever it might have been. Once again, who is talking? We have many, many, many mental citizens, is how Swami called it. He said we're a whole city of citizens, and you want to make sure that you give the reins of power to the ones who have earned the right to do it. So there are many signs of, what kind of intuition you're having. The more elevated the intuition, in a very interesting way, the calmer and more certain we feel of it. When we have to defend it emotionally, and when we feel terrified if we don't get our own way, these are all signs that at least some element of subconscious is influencing us. And I don't know how else to say it, but there is a certain feeling. And when you make a few colossal mistakes, which it seems to me like, as far as I know, is the only way we ever learn these things. I remember I was in charge of this project, and this was, again, early on with things. I was in charge of this project, and I made certain decisions. And I made certain decisions because I was trying to do what I was doing better than someone else had done it earlier, something like that. And I just made a few really bad decisions right at the beginning, and I loved what Swami said afterwards when it was all sort of, fortunately it wasn't a major catastrophe, it was only a minor one. He said, just sort of sweetly, but very definitely, "Oh, Asha, when your ego gets involved, you make terrible decisions." And I've always sort of had that in the back, and I remember what that felt like. I remembered my thoughts. And part of my thoughts were, "Oh, I'm going to do this really well." And of course, the idea that I'm going to do this really well is not a superconscious idea. It's a subconscious idea. It's a, "Look at me, aren't I terrific?" And so as soon as that thought form comes in, I learned, and I learned powerfully from that experience, be very, very suspicious. Be very suspicious. And when we're trying to introspect afterwards, be very suspicious of defensiveness, emotional. And when it's a real superconscious intuition, there's just a calm certainty about it, that it is what's supposed to happen. And, most of the time it does, much of the time it does. But and at least I'll speak for myself, that kind of calm superconscious certainty does not come all the time. Many intuitions are like semi-superconscious. There's an element of it. It's like, and I'll have to talk more about this tomorrow because I'm out of time. Like, you get the superconscious inspiration, but then you mess it up with subconscious feelings. So it isn't quite such a clear, "I'm right" kind of energy for most of us as we would like it to be. Well, there's a whole lot more to say about this, and it's very important. So we'll continue tomorrow. God bless you.